I'm not afraid to die by any means. I would say a fear of leaving my children and having them without a mom.
What should have been one of the happiest times in her life became filled with worry when Ashley was diagnosed with a cancer she hadn't heard of before. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma, specifically diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, or DLBCL.
I started having symptoms while I was pregnant. So I actually had a baby December of 2023. And at the end of my pregnancy, I was having a lot of complications with my heart rate. After I had my baby, probably in like February of 2024, I started to feel super like lightheaded and almost like I was like hanging upside down for a very long time. And it was starting to be where I was getting concerned to even be alone with the baby. Like I felt like I was going to pass out, or like, what if I'm holding him and something like this happens?
Dizziness wasn't her only concern. Ashley also started to have trouble breastfeeding. A trip to see her midwife helped lead to the diagnosis.
I went to go nurse one day and I couldn't like even extend my nipple to like nurse. Like it was completely caved in. And I had tried everything to get it, unclogged, the hot showers, the massaging. So I reached out to my midwife. I didn't realize how big the lump was. It was literally the size of like a baseball. But I didn't even think like any red flags. So that day she actually got me in and she looked at it and she was like, Ashley, this is very, very large. You need to see the breast cancer center, which was wild to me. So then I had went in and they obviously did biopsies on both breasts and then my armpits, lymph nodes, and that's how I found out.
The average age for a DLBCL diagnosis is in the mid-60s to late 60s. Ashley says being diagnosed at a much younger age made the treatment process even more frustrating.
So I was literally just like 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, I found out I had cancer. They said that, you're so young and everybody that we usually see with this cancer is, late 70s. So they had told me that it was going to be an absolute breeze. I actually had a very, very hard time being heard because I was so young. Chemo rocked my world and I was extremely sick. I barely had time between rounds where I was like recovered from the last round to my next round. And I kept telling my oncologist, like, I am so miserable and I am so sick. And the response that I kept getting was, you're young and you shouldn't be.
DLBCL can be a devastating diagnosis. But top cancer doctors, Dr. Amir Steinberg from Westchester Medical Center and Dr. Joshua Brody from Mount Sinai, want people to know there's a lot of hope.
We're very lucky because even though really lymphoma is technically the fifth most common cancer in America, we have more FDA-approved medicines for lymphoma than for any other cancer, more than for breast cancer, which is so incredibly common. So that's awesome because it means we have more options for patients.
There's so much that's changed in the last 20, 30 years. It's just, especially the last 5 years. It's just things are just changing for the better so rapidly for patients. And we have so much to catch up on and to stay up on in terms of the knowledge out there as doctors. But it's totally worth it because it will make patients' lives better and more fulfilling.
Despite assurances from doctors, treatment was daunting.
I don't think people understand that you can see the physical all you want. You can see the hair loss. You can see the bloating. You can see the puking. You can see the literal color drain from your face. You cannot see the inner dialogue. You can't see them fighting for their life. You can't see the anger, the conversations with God of why, the questions of like, did I do something wrong to deserve this?
As a mom of 3, Ashley dealt with mixed emotions: guilt, stress, and sadness over the experiences she lost.
I honestly think I kind of got robbed from the joy. I think it was just, he's my last baby. And, it really, I had this huge goal of like nursing, and, it was easy with him and just having all these plans. And I was in so much pain from my cancer. And then I have a 9-year-old and an almost 5-year-old. So juggling that and, trying to figure out the best way to talk to them and, tell them the news, and trying to tell them like what I'm going through. And it just really, I think that was like probably the roughest part, is just like the world doesn't stop. And I think that like that thought came into my head so many times while having cancer, is like it truly does not. So you still have to show up, and you still have to be a mom, and you still have to be a spouse, and you still have to be all of these things while like battling the biggest like physical thing that you'll ever go through, but like the biggest like emotional and mental struggle that you'll like ever have to battle, while still having to show up for everybody around you. And that is like such a hard challenge.
One of the hardest emotions Ashley had to deal with was the anger.
I knew I was showing up that way. I knew that I was mad and not the best version of myself. And then you have this like complete guilt of like, well, what if you die? And this is who you showed up as, and this is who you left as, and like this is how you treated your fiance, and this is how you treated your kids, and like don't you value life, and didn't you say that you wanted to show up differently, and didn't you say that like you were going to be this completely different person, because like now you know the value of life, and that can be taken away. So now like you have this complete guilt trip of who you're showing up as, but at the same time you're so mad. You're so mad.
During those moments, Ashley leaned into her family and her faith.
And I've seen other people talk about it, but there is this sense of peace, and knowing that I have not really experienced in my life. Definitely not the peace that just carried me through. And I think like having to be here for my kids, and the thought of them like not having a mom. There were so many times where I was like, if I was doing this for me, I wouldn't have gone through it. Like it was just too much. It was so hard that I truly don't know if I would have showed up in the same capacity.
After 6 rounds of chemo, Ashley thought the hardest part was over. But her DLBCL was refractory, meaning it did not respond well to initial treatment.
When I did my chemo, they don't even talk about like, these are the steps and this is what they'll do. Again, age factor was a huge thing. They did have, conversations of, there is other things out there, but that, it went from you beating this is like a 70% chance. And, the odds are really good to me going to Mayo, and my odds going down to 10%. And the biggest concern is waiting between the CAR T. But after they told me like, this is your last option. This is our last effort. So if this doesn't work, there really isn't anything out there. more for you to do.
CAR T-cell therapy came with new challenges.
When you go through the CAR T, you have to be gone and by the hospital for 47 days and away from your family and, do this whole thing. And then I was like, what if I go through all of this and then I still have cancer? And that was like something that like I didn't want to face. I didn't even want to like have that be a possibility, to the point that like I just wanted to be done.
Ashley's experience reflects the complexity of DLBCL treatment. It's one of the reasons why doctors are constantly looking to new research and clinical trials for answers. One of the answers is a newer option in immunotherapy called bispecific antibodies.
Even for people that relapse in the first year, and even people that are third line, there is great evidence for bispecific anti plus chemotherapy, and it certainly overall seem to be a bit safer than transplant, maybe safer than CAR T cells, and certainly it's a lot more accessible, I think, to folks who are being treated in the community when they sometimes don't have a CAR T center very nearby. Because if you're getting more options, that can only be a good thing. People would rather have a clear answer, but really they would rather have better therapies, better options.
Whenever possible, we try and offer trials because that's how we advance the science. That's how we get the cure rates higher. So they're essential.
While Ashley eventually found a great and supportive medical team, she wishes she had advocated for herself more from the beginning.
That is one thing I regret. And that's like one thing I tell somebody is like, you have to advocate for yourself. And I'm not that person. I'm like a very shy person who like doesn't want to make somebody upset and like, wants to make everybody happy. So I very, very much struggled with like advocating for myself. Like
Ashley's advice to others: advocate for yourself. Lean into your faith. Learn to accept the changes.
Be honest with how you feel. Have those hard conversations. Lean into God as much as you possibly can, because at times that's literally all you got. You would be very, very surprised at what you're willing to go through and the battles you're willing to overcome for the people that you love. It's almost like an adrenaline rush to make it through. And advocate for yourself. If something doesn't feel right, if you know something's wrong, if you feel sick, if you're in pain, talk about it until you're blue in the face and somebody listens to you. You know your own body, and you have that intuition for a reason, and you know when something is wrong. You make it out alive. You will never be this version of yourself again. And that is completely okay. Sometimes we have to go through something that is completely terrifying and completely life-changing to figure out who we want to show up as and what's important to us. It's gonna suck so bad, but you find out who your people are. There's so many people that love you, and you make it.